Hello and welcome. It is a great day for a safety seminar. We're so glad to have you all here. As we're waiting for folks to join in, I encourage those who are already in the webinar room to head over to our chat, drop your name, tell us where you're coming from, what you're most excited for. Today, we're covering the Spring Flying Safety Seminar. So if you're looking forward to warmer days, today's topic might just be the right place to start. My name is Sharon Chung. I'm the Director of National Programming for COPA. I'm joined by Dominic Oshmanik from ForeFlight, our very own board member, Clark Morowitz, as well as Jason Rosewell from Infinite Flight, and COPA's newest team member, Jim Ferrier, Director of Aviation Operations. So welcome everybody here today. Before I get started, I'm just going to quickly look at the chat and see folks coming in. I see you all saying hello. We see Matt from Edmonton, Anastasia from foggy Montreal. It's a bit of a snowstorm here in Ottawa apparently tonight. I haven't seen anything yet. Larry Buckmaster out of Kelowna. Hello, hello. Thank you all for joining us here tonight. Okay, so you are seeing a lot of maybe familiar faces, some new faces. I thought it would be a really good opportunity to get you to meet our newest team member, Jim, as you'll be seeing him quite a bit through our safety seminars. And so aviation is a world filled with stories. So Jim, what's your story? What got you into flying? What do you enjoy most about aviation?
My story, oh boy. Well, I got into flying when I was 16. I got my glider license when I was 16. I think what really got me into it was as a kid, I used to go down to the airport when my dad would travel. And back in those days at the Ottawa airport, they had a balcony that you could actually go out and stand there and watch planes come and go. So I think, from being a toddler, I just fell in love with it. And it was always something that I sort of wanted to do. So when I turned 13, I joined the Air Cadets, and that really convinced me that that's what I wanted to do. So I was lucky enough to get both a gliding license and a private pilot's license through the cadets, and then through the years, commercial, IFR, made a career in the air navigation system, flight service specialist for a number of years, a little bit of air traffic control. Ended up retiring about 2 years ago as the director of Aeronautical Information Management and Flight Operations at NAV Canada. So COPA interested me. I've been flying for 40 years. So when the opportunity presented itself, I jumped at it. And so far, in the month that I've been here, I've been having a blast. So.
Yeah, and we've loved having you here with us. It's funny how that early exposure can really set a trajectory for your life. So it's great to have your experience with us on the team. And for those who are in the chat, as you're introducing yourselves, tell us what got you into aviation as well. We'd love to hear about those stories. Jim, your role is Director of Aviation Operations. What does that mean? What can our members expect from you in that capacity?
Well, I think the biggest thing is really it's, having someone in a position here to help when there's questions. As I said, I've had my career in aviation. This is a second career. So I'm really here just because I love aviation and want to be involved. As I said, I've been flying since I was 16. 99.9% of it is GA. So really, really enjoying what I'm doing. It's a breath of fresh air. I guess really part of what I'm doing every day is really keeping an eye on what's going on in the aviation world. Obviously, COPA is here to represent and look out for GA's interests. So keeping on top of the stories and the issues that are arising. So wanting to do that and really help anybody if they have questions about anything. We have lots of resources in COPA as far as knowledge that we can lean on. So if people have any questions at all, reach out. I'd be happy to help. If I can't do it, I will find somebody who could do it, hopefully. So anybody who thinks they have something they want, reach out, feel free.
Hey, you all heard it here first. Send to Jim a note if you have any questions on some relevant aviation topics. I'm looking at the chat here. David Fast was picking peaches near the approach path and just knew there was a better life. Isn't that fabulous? I'm sure there's quite a few more here of just family members or someone showing you the ropes, and that's beautiful. Some other things on the go with COPA on our end, just worth sharing. We do have our national fly-in coming up in June, so very excited to share that's still on the go. It's going to be a hit. If you're looking for something to put in your agenda, your schedule now, June 23rd through 25th, it's going to be a really, really good time. The COPA flight out in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu, COPA Flight 160, has a lot of fun programming on the go. There'll be a balloon festival, there'll be magicians, obviously there'll be flying, there'll be all the workshops that reflect the aviation history to new technologies, things that would be of interest, and we will have our pilot recurrent training as part of this safety seminar series during the fly-in itself. So we'll have a lot on the go. And if you are a member of one of our COPA flights, we are thinking of you, and I'm excited to share that we will be hosting a leadership summit in early May for COPA flight captains, as well as one other designate. So two spots per COPA flight. It'll be a great opportunity for COPA leaders or leaders in training to connect together to talk about best practices. We're always curious or having good discussions around how do we recruit more pilots? How do we recruit more members? How do we build a bigger community? And so we'll have those discussions there. We'll also tell you about upcoming programs, train you on them, and of course talk about general aviation issues. So wanted to flag that there for you. A couple notes from a housekeeping perspective. As always, there is that chat on the side of the screen. There's 3 little dots. You can click on it. It unfolds the chat, and if you find that distracting, you can keep full attention on the speakers themselves. As for agenda, we'll first hear from our friends at ForeFlight. They are one of our program sponsors, so that'll be a great presentation, a good opportunity to ask all your questions to Adrian. We also will have to Dominic, pardon me, and then we'll also have Clark take over with a presentation shortly after that. We'll have a Q&A, we'll have a video presentation from SiriusXM, as well as conclude the event with a fantastic presentation from Jason from Infinite Flight, one of COPA's proud new partners. So with that, I think it's a good opportunity to get this party started. Dominic, could we get your presentation ready to go? Let's see here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sharon. I see that, so we'll get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Dominic. I have the pleasure of joining you today for another COPA safety seminar. My colleague Adrian and I have actually been kind of taking turns doing these, and we love to be for one, sponsoring COPA because we believe in the power of aviation, especially general aviation in Canada. And Adrian and I are general aviation pilots in Canada ourselves, so we've definitely been a part of COPA for a while and love to be a part of this. And thank you so much for having us. And a little bit about myself. Let's just change here. I started flying in 2010 and got involved with ForeFlight in 2015. I've been with them for 7 years now. Did my flight training at the University of Western Ontario, graduated from there, and then became an instructor for about 3 years. After that, flew for medevac and regional airlines, which I'm still doing right now. And meanwhile, getting involved with ForeFlight was probably the best decision I ever made because it really kept me in the loop with regards to the GA side of things. Once you get into that commercial kind of airline world, you lose a lot of that GA knowledge, and I'm grateful that ForeFlight's kind of kept me in that. Adrian and I's main job here at ForeFlight is to really just educate and support the app and ForeFlight in Canada, especially just to advocate for Canadian pilots. It is an American company. It was started in 2007. One of the first aviation apps for the iPad and the iPhone, and it kind of really took off from there with the advent of more devices and everything going to digital formats. So the rest is kind of history. Now they have offices in Houston, Austin, Texas, Portland, Denmark, and really have become a global company with joining Boeing as their kind of group of companies. So yeah, when I joined ForeFlight, it was about 50 employees, and now it's thousands. So it's been really awesome to see how it grows, how it's grown, and just a little bit of topic discussion for today. I'm going to highlight some new features in ForeFlight that just came out in the past couple of months, November and December, I believe. We generally bring out updates every month, so there's always something on the horizon, and they have a pretty aggressive update schedule. So remember always to keep your ForeFlight app up to date with the new latest and greatest. We're going to talk a little bit about spring flying with ForeFlight, what to watch out for, some in-flight weather options for Canadian pilots, and of course Q&As. If you have any burning questions for us, I'll be more than happy to answer them today. And if we don't get to it today, there's opportunities for you to submit those later on. So some new feature highlights. In version 14.0 of ForeFlight, we came up with new aeronautical map filters. For those of you who are familiar with ForeFlight, you know that there's kind of an aeronautical layer on the maps page that really is adaptable to your flying. And we've kind of made that a little more adaptable now. So with the customizable layers now, you can declutter the aeronautical map view for both airways, nav aids, and waypoints. Whereas previously it was toggled into one single toggle, now it's kind of broken down. So you can choose to just see VORs or just waypoints, or if you're flying VFR, get rid of those because you don't really need those and hide and kind of declutter the map a little bit for you. So that's just a little thing there. For the US pilots, for if you fly into the US, there's now a quick ability to find takeoff and alternate minimums. They'll be listed directly on the map on the airports tab. So, and it goes directly to your alternate minimums for your specific airport. Whereas before you had to kind of look through it and go through a lot of pages. So that's another update there. Airport markers in 3D. So for those of you who have a Performance Plus subscription with ForeFlight, you'll be familiar with the 3D feature. You can now see airport markers actually when you're previewing 3D or flying with 3D view. And once you tap on those markers, you'll get the same kind of functionality as you would on the maps page without having to actually go to the maps page. And if you tap on any one of those airport markers, you'll get all the information listed in kind of a quick and easy way. The other kind of additional feature to 3D has been the obstacles. They come up and show as yellow or red, identifying potential hazards on your route. This is kind of a unique one going into Buttonville Airport here in Toronto. Once you preview that route or you're flying at a certain altitude that you're going to have those obstacles, you're going to see those obstacles come up as red and yellow, potentially hazardous along your route. So kind of another nice visual there to have. So getting back into flying for many of you, I know myself, I haven't flown GA just in the winter just because of everything going on and the weather itself. But what I like to remind pilots especially is your iPad is really like any aircraft system, right? So add it to your pre-flight checklist. Check the software, check ForeFlight software versions and iOS versions. There's nothing worse than getting your airplane and realizing that you're out of date and you have an old app version that something doesn't work, or you're just not up to snuff. So that's always great to know. You can always check the most current version either through the App Store or on our website. Currently, the most current version of ForeFlight is 14.0, and you can always check on your device by going more and about to see what version you're running on your device there. But some other things that you may not think of, but check batteries, right? Device charge, make sure that the iPad is actually charged. And if you're going for a longer flight, make sure you have backup batteries or a way to charge it in your aircraft. And finally, keep current on your charts and data. A really easy way to do that in ForeFlight is using the pack feature, where it kind of takes your route into consideration and packs all the charts that you need for your particular route. So again, proficiency is key. It really is a valuable tool, but not if you're going to go up and use it for the first time. ForeFlight really requires you to kind of couch fly a little bit. And if you do have any questions, this ForeFlight mobile guide is a great kind of gateway to some of those answers. And if you can't find them there, again, there's plenty of resources to help you find the answers and how do you do this, how do you do that. Some features I like to highlight always in the spring as we go through kind of the thaw. There's a lot of VFR internal procedures for airports. Some surprise me in just how simple they are, but there's still VFR internal procedure for that airport. So you can access those in ForeFlight directly through the Airports tab. You don't have to go to the document section and to the CFS. They are integrated into the airports directly. So if you go into Airports, Procedures, and Other, you'll see the VFR terminal procedure chart listed there for that airport if it has one. If it doesn't, then you're not going to see it there. But that's just something to keep in mind. Additionally, we get a lot of questions about how do I know my VNC or VTA chart is current. What ForeFlight does is usually by default, it stitches all the VNC charts and VTA charts together, which is great, but sometimes you want to see those legends. Sometimes you want to see what actual chart you're flying. So ForeFlight has a setting called Map Touch Action that you can go into. And if you tap Bring Chart to Front with Legends, you're actually going to get the ability to see what chart you're looking at as if it were laid out just on a table. So you can always look at the edition number, the validity date, what chart you're actually looking at, and kind of go from there. The legends may be a little hard to read there, but they're also available in the documents section as well for both the VTA and VNC. So if you ever want a refresher, that's kind of a nice way to do it. And I think the biggest thing with ForeFlight is just how much information you can get in such a short period of time. How many layers you can put on a map and kind of see the big picture of weather, in particularly if you're flying for the first time in a while. The spring period is very, very fluid in Canada, as we all know. We get everything from snow and rain, which we just got today in Toronto, to, very dry, very humid or humid days. So, we kind of get everything here. And the ability to kind of combine the profile view, if you have a Pro or Performance Plus subscription, is really, really great. And I love it because you can easily see where the icing forecasts are, where the cloud layers are, and you can adjust your altitude based on what you're seeing. So I planned a flight out the other day from London to Muskoka, Ontario, and 5,500 feet wasn't working, but 3,500 feet did. And I kind of planned my way around that. And the reason I was able to see that was just by dragging my altitude up and down and seeing where the cloud coverage and icing was forecast to be. So it's really an invaluable tool in that sense. Another thing I like to highlight is the altitude advisor. Kind of less used by GA, we find, just because you kind of already have a sense of what altitude you want to fly at based on the airspace, or just your default kind of aircraft altitude. But we really encourage you to take a look at the altitude advisor. It does take current winds and forecast winds into consideration, depending on what estimated time of departure you've put in. And you can just kind of sort it by VFR, IFR, or westerly or easterly flights. And the important thing here is to make sure to have an aircraft profile set up that encompasses your fuel burn for takeoff and landing and cruise, because that'll give you the most accurate information there. And then you can kind of make the best decision based on that. As always, there's an extensive Nav Canada library directly in ForeFlight. If you go to Documents, Drives, and Nav Canada, everything's there for everything from the CapGen, the AIM to the actual CFS. There's a lot of great resources there, and we're constantly kind of building to improve that library as well. Transport Canada and Nav Canada have a lot of great resources that we're trying to get in there too, such as guides. So yeah, just wanted to highlight that. We do have a whole Filing in Canada webinar that I did, and that's posted on our website. Don't have much time to get into it now, but you have the ability to file both IFR and VFR flight plans in ForeFlight. IFR, VFR, and Y and Z flight plans in ForeFlight in Canada, and the ability to do that cross-border as well. So ForeFlight will file a flight plan. It'll get to the right people. You just have to make sure you take care of your APIS, your customs, if you're flying to the States. And there's a couple other caveats there too, which I discussed in this webinar. So if you have a chance, please, and if you're planning to fly to the States, this is a great resource for that. The other thing I want to highlight was a weather option for Canadian pilots. If you have American pilot friends, you know that they have awesome weather capabilities there just through the ADS-B. Unfortunately, we don't have that up here, but we do have some options. And the best option through ForeFlight for pilots is the GDL 51 or 52. Getting back into flying, having the most up-to-date weather is key, and this is something kind of an inexpensive option to have that. Once you do have the receiver, you do need a subscription for the Sirius XM through ForeFlight. And there's just a lot of advantages to having it over ADS-B too. So you can use it if you fly to the States as well, or if you fly just in Canada. And it does cover a large area in Canada. They do have a range chart on their website that you can take a look at, and through our website as well. But just something to consider. And that will run you about $40 a month for Sirius XM and ForeFlight. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely check it out. Some useful resources. The pilot's guide I mentioned before, we have a ton of videos on foreflight.com that we continuously update, and a lot of webinars as well. We do a lot of blog posts, and when all else fails, don't be afraid to email team@foreflight.com, where myself, Adrian, or one of our many other colleagues will be happy to answer you. And the other thing I forgot to mention is that most of our team members on the pilot support team at ForeFlight are actual pilots. I can only think of a handful of few that are not, but are willing to get their pilot's licenses. And so, you know, you're not just emailing a computer. These are real people, real pilots talking to you to answer your questions. I wanted to highlight that we are having a VFR Flying in Canada webinar next Wednesday at February 23rd at about 2 p.m. Eastern time. So just to put that out there, I will be getting into a lot more detail on what we kind of brushed on today. And it will be recorded and available on our website there, foreflight.com/support/webinars. With that, I want to open up some questions. If you have any burning questions, please feel free to ask. And if not, I'll stick around a little later to answer them as well. I want to thank Sharon and COPA for organizing all this and for having us on. And we look forward to being here again soon.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much for the presentation, Dominic. We really appreciate you for being here, spending your time with us. And I really do like that you drew our attention to ForeFlight's growth at the very beginning, because I do think many of us have seen that rapid growth. So congratulations on that. Before we get into questions, I should mention that Jim, who you all had met earlier, that our new director, and I are looking through all your questions. So please don't be shy. If it's a question on a product or an acronym, anything that we might have missed, let us know. So Jim, do you see any questions that we could flag over to Dominic?
Right now, I'm really just seeing comments. So we can take the comments and we can certainly pass them on afterwards as we normally would.
Okay, let's do that.
There's a question here. Any plans to port to Android?
Yes, the ever asked question to ForeFlight. What do you say, Dominic?
You know what? They always said that they weren't going to do it, but I have a strong suspicion that that might change. There's no plans for it yet, and they're not announcing anything yet. But I know that it's probably been the most requested or piece of feedback that we've gotten over the last 7 years for me. So never say never, but there's no plans for it just yet.
Sharon, there is a technical question that came out, which is at least one person is only getting about half the audio.
Is it a particular speaker, or if anyone has tech issues here, the best thing to do is to refresh your page. If it's any of us, let us know. I do sometimes have audio issues on my computer, so I would like to know, but the best thing is to refresh your page. I think there are some questions around connecting Sentry. Does Sentry give weather on ForeFlight in Canada?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Sentry will not give you weather in Canada just because of the ADSB coverage. It is an ADSB receiver,
right?
And it needs a ground station to be able to get you that weather. So unless you're extremely close to the border in southwestern Ontario, basically, you're not going to get much. But what it will give you is that depending on what Sentry you do buy, it gives you a CO2 sensor. And it also gives you traffic awareness as far as ADSB in receiving other ADSB in receivers. So yeah, it's not a great option for pilots, but it's definitely not completely useless depending on the receiver that you purchase.
We've got a couple more questions. First is on what's the lowest cost entry point for ForeFlight? Yeah,
great question. Currently, I always forget the conversion for the Canadian dollar, but it's $99 US, whatever that converts to $120 Canadian is the basic plus subscription currently. So that's kind of the basic entry point. And, you know, it may sound like a lot for initially, but if you consider how much you spend normally a year on charts and weather and all the other kind of features, a logbook, you might have a different app for a logbook. That's all integrated into ForeFlight. So it really is worth it in my opinion. And it depends on what type of flying you do. If you do just, VFR flying and you're a PPL pilot, the basic plus subscription is more than enough for you. If you have more of a high performance aircraft, you might want to look at those higher plans because they provide a little more value for you. So yeah, good question.
Okay. Another one. Can the data in the navigation page showing heading, etc., be made larger? Sometimes it is hard to read in turbulence.
Yeah, fair enough. It's always difficult for us to add more to the app and not take away from the usability. That's great feedback. I will pass it along. But right now, there's no current way to do that. Yeah.
Let's take maybe one more.
Does ForeFlight have a magnetic compass heading feature?
It does not. It takes your GPS altitude and, let me reverse that. Through synthetic vision, you do get a compass heading, but it's not based on a magnetic compass heading there. So that's one option to do it, but it doesn't really have a specific standalone magnetic compass heading feature. That's, again, something we can look at doing, but not right now.
Okay, I definitely see a lot of positive comments here of how worthwhile it is to use ForeFlight, and I'm sure there's more specific questions to the types of devices that types of iPads or Apple devices that ForeFlight's applicable on. Dominic is sticking around for at least a few minutes, and we'll answer what we can here tonight through the chat, but if there's anything that's missed, we'll take as many as we can and send it over to the ForeFlight team to answer that there. And I did want to draw your attention one more time to the webinar. I put it under an offer. So it's, when is it again, Dominic? It's next Wednesday? And
yeah,
it's
next
on
Wednesday it's 3 p.m. Eastern and 2 p.m. Central. And it's it's about VFR flying in Canada, so we kind of go through a whole flight and the whole filing procedure as well. So much more detail than we did today. So I really encourage everyone to sign up for that one.
Very good. We'll definitely check that out. Thank you very much for this presentation. I know the questions are probably piling on right now, so we'll try to get to those. We can't get to everyone. So before we go into the main presentation with Clark, I definitely want to at least introduce Jason here, who is one of our COPA members. And I had asked Jim, so let's stay to that trend of what tell us about yourself and what got you into flying.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Jason. I work in digital marketing with ForeFlight. Sorry, we just listened to ForeFlight with Infinite Flight. I'm a brand new pilot. I'm just started my PPL 1 year ago. So I've been flying around Ontario a little bit. I've yet to go any farther from Parry Sound to Ottawa. But so brand new pilot. And I'm excited to be here. We have a I don't know if it's been mentioned yet, but we have a brand new partnership with COPA as of this week. It's been in the works for a long time, and so we're really excited about that. So every COPA member can try our Infinite Flight Pro subscription for 90 days. And so we're excited to offer that, and I'm going to talk a little bit more later about the benefits of using that.
Yes, fabulous things happen within our own COPA member network. Jason had definitely, he actually approached COPA on making this happen, and we're very excited about it. So we'll learn more about Infinite Flight soon. I think it's a good time to get into the main presentation. So Clark, could we bring you on? And I think many of you have met Clark or you're familiar with Clark, but before we get your presentation started, we should hear more about who you are and about your background.
Sure thing. So good evening, everybody. My name is Clark, currently a director for Southern Ontario on the COPA board. I've been on the board for 3.5 years now. My aviation career dates back to 2005 when I got my glider license in Air Cadets. Got my private license in Air Cadets in Waterloo, and did the rest of my training in Oshawa. Was a flight instructor in Oshawa for 2 years. I still hold a valid Class 2 instructor rating, do some freelance instructing, up to and including this week, doing an IFR rating right now on a gorgeous 182 out of Peterborough. And my day job is training captain with Porter Airlines out of Billy Bishop Airport. And just have a big passion for this. And I know myself, I owned a 172 for about 4.5 years or so. And I was one of those pilots that basically just put my airplane to bed in the fall, let it hibernate, let my bank account fill up again a little bit, and then would resume flying in the spring. I've now moved into being a half owner in a Cessna 310, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to fly that year round. But we'll get the presentation up here. There we go. Thank you, Sharon. All right. So before we get started, I was curious to know from everybody here, are you like I was with my 172, do you hibernate and let your airplane hibernate in the winter? Or are you like what I hope to be in my 310 and fly year-round? So we have a polling question there that I think Sharon is going to bring up here for us. And if you can find that, select your option, and let's see what we've got. All right, seeing lots of people flying year-round. That's great.
Clark, it might be good to draw out the numbers. I made a mistake and didn't display the results.
Oh, okay, sure. So we're looking at about 1/3 of the people hibernate over the winter, and about 2/3 are flying year-round. So that's great. There's lots of benefits to flying year-round. Obviously, proficiency is a main one, but the visibility is generally better in the winter. The airports are usually not as busy. If you're looking to keep your night proficiency, it gets darker earlier in the day, there's lots of great events in the winter, some that COPA is related with. Unfortunately, some of them have been canceled this year because of the conditions, but Lac La Biche in Alberta comes to mind. Montebello in the past. There's a few others on the Ottawa River. I can think of Canisius Lake in southern Ontario. So looks like we're kind of stabilizing around 33% hibernate and about 65% fly year-round. So that's great. Waking ourselves up from our deep winter slumber, we look at the weather we've had today in the eastern half of the country. Southern Ontario has got a monsoon worth of rain that's going to switch over to snow, and we're going to get a little bit of freezing rain. For those of us down east, you're going to get what we're getting right now coming up. But we're going to try and be optimistic here and think about the spring weather. Next thing, aircraft pre-flights. Bringing that airplane out of hibernation. What do you need to look for? The Unsafe Checklist. It's probably something that you haven't heard since flight school. We'll go through that. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the benefits of having a flight review with a flight instructor. So winter weather. This is very much a generalization. So if it's not exactly what you're experiencing in your part of the country right now, those of you that are in, I saw there was somebody from Mexico and somebody from Australia tuning in. Your weather is probably very different than this. But in most of Canada, we generally experience dry, clear, and cold conditions. In the coastal areas, British Columbia, and then the Maritimes, and then for us here in the Great Lakes region, we experience persistent precipitation, which we're getting today with a mix of rain and snow, lower ceilings, and gusty winds. As spring arrives, this begins to change. And, the transition that we have gets us into the summer weather. So the summer weather, generally good conditions, often interrupted by frontal storms and squall lines. We've got gusty winds in the plains, calm conditions in the morning, generally leading to turbulence clouds of vertical development in the afternoon, and then classic moist weather conditions in the coastal areas. But how do we get there? We get there by going through spring. So spring is the season of transition, similar to fall. In the winter, our jet stream is stronger and positioned further south. We're really seeing that in southern Ontario today. If you look at the frontal maps, the surface analysis charts, you really get to see that. As the seasons turn to spring, the jet stream starts to weaken and migrates north. As this migration occurs, warm air and moist air returns to the majority of Canada. And in the Great Lakes region, we have a lot of winter warm fronts, typically in the early spring. So, basically right around when we change over from winter to spring, getting into maybe that first week of April, we see that. And just a refresher on what a winter warm front is, it's not what we're having today in southern Ontario. That's kind of the reverse. We're having a cold front go through here today. With a winter warm front, it's one of those where the school buses are all canceled and the roads are a mess. You start off with snow, and then we move to ice pellets, freezing rain, and then eventually rain. And now, most of us are probably not going to be flying on a day like this. Those of us that work in the airlines, we have our fair share of these that we have to contend with. But what's really critical to note is where the freezing level is. And so if you see on the bottom of that slide, there's a red line that indicates where the freezing level is, and that tends to change. We start out with cold air, and then as the front gets closer to your location, it changes to ice pellets and freezing rain, and then eventually just rain. But the critical thing to know is the conditions that are on the surface are not necessarily what the conditions are like up at altitude. At altitude, you might be dealing with just snow, or you might be dealing with rain or freezing rain. And if your aircraft is not equipped for a flight into known icing, then it's generally conditions you're going to want to avoid. So spring flying conditions that we need to consider: temperature versus dew point, freezing level, cloud heights, surface winds, and turbulence. So our temperature and dew point, I'll see if anybody can come up with some of these in the chat, but if we have temperature and dew point that are close together, do we typically have good visibility or bad visibility? I'll see if anybody can come up with that. Next thing is freezing level. We kind of talked about that with the winter warm front. Cloud heights, we are going to see, it's really important what those cloud heights are, especially in early spring. We're still dealing with freezing levels that are closer to the ground. Even if you're instrument rated and your airplane is certified for IFR, if you take off and you're climbing higher than the freezing level, you could be flying into icing conditions. So seeing lots of bad visibility, getting fog, all of that. So that's great. Good job, everybody. Surface winds. Usually in that period of transition, we're going to see lots of gusty wind days. I know for myself, landing at Billy Bishop Airport in downtown Toronto, in the Dash 8, we have all kinds of fun and interesting conditions that we have to fly in. There's plenty of videos online if you want to see a Dash 8 being tossed around like it's a Cessna 150. And then speaking of that, we have turbulence. So something that we want to consider as well, especially if we're taking passengers or it's been a little while since you've flown yourself. Try to pick those nice smooth days, calm days, to make sure that your first flight back out of hibernation is a success. So I brought this up. This is a GFA. Some of you may have not looked at a GFA in a long time, but this one I picked, it is from the fall, this October 25th of last year, but there's a lot going on this GFA that is worth noting. Probably not the best flying day in most of the prairie region. You've got a low-level jet stream coming up from southern central Saskatchewan up towards Edmonton. We've got patchy mixed icing down at lower altitudes. Where there isn't precipitation, we've got mechanical turbulence, low-level wind shear. All of those things are going to make for a very, very messy day. So the last piece of that I want to point out to you is over in the legend area, which is on the right side of the screen. There's a little note here that's worth pointing out. So nil or light rime icing in cloud above freezing levels unless noted, nil to light turbulence unless noted. So the critical piece of that is that there could be light rime, icing, and cloud. And so for those of us that are not don't have aircraft that are certified for flight into known icing, that's a showstopper if we are flying into any sort of cloud. So going back to the previous slide, we've got clouds as low as 2,000 to 3,000 feet up in northern Manitoba. That's going to be a showstopper for us. So just keep that in mind there. This is something that I just discovered, and I thought it was really worth bringing to everybody's attention. NAV Canada produces manuals that are called the Local Area Weather Manual. They're available for free on Canada's website. They break down local weather phenomenon by region and like very specific regions. So they break it down even by towns and cities. And I think that this would be particularly helpful if you're flying to a unfamiliar part of Canada. And if you want to have a look at that, you can scan that QR code while I take a drink of water. And so if you do want to look at that later, this is what it brings you up to. And so you can select the various regions throughout the country, and then you can break it down even further than that. And I just looked up where I live in Cobourg, Ontario, which is between Toronto and Kingston on the north shore of Lake Ontario. And the information that they describe is remarkably accurate for the weather conditions that we generally see here. And it's broken down by the various seasons as well. So if you are, in my part of the country and you're flying out to British Columbia, you've never flown out there before, you can look that up. If you're from the prairies and you're coming to the East Coast, you can look up that weather as well. And I think this is a really, really great resource that NAV Canada has, and it's free. So turning from the weather to the aircraft, waking up a hibernating aircraft. And this, we're going to get into more detail on this. We've got a video at the end of my presentation that goes into this in a little bit more detail. But the main points are to conduct a thorough pre-flight inspection. Remember, this airplane has sat for a long time. You have probably not laid eyes on the airplane in months. And if you don't share a hangar, the odds are that nobody has. The only eyes that might have been on it may have been mice or birds or something like that. The condition of the aircraft, if it sits outside, has there been a bunch of wet snow that's been sitting on the horizontal stabilizer, pushing the tail down to the ground? We unfortunately see that at a lot of general aviation airports throughout the winter. If people don't get a chance to get out and clean the horizontal stabilizers off, the airplane might have been sitting in a configuration that it's not designed for. Potentially there could have been damage caused as a result of that. So having a really good look at your airplane, because it's not necessarily in the same condition as it was when you put it away. We're going to get into some operational considerations, and then lastly, aircraft performance planning. So the pre-flight inspection. So the main thing, treat the pre-flight inspection as if the aircraft is coming out of its annual inspection. Now, what do I mean by that? It's basically to say that have a look at every inspection cover, have a look at your tires, have a look at the condition of the propeller. If you're in a shared hangar, make sure that nobody bumped into your airplane and didn't happen to tell you about it. Moving on, the controls, making sure that the controls are actually free and correct. There are times where you can get rain, such as we're having today in Southern Ontario, that finds its way into the control surfaces, then it freezes, then it starts to break things internally. So making sure that not only do the controls move in the direction that they're supposed to, but also that that whether you've got a yoke or a stick or a side stick, that whatever it's supposed to be doing, make sure that it's actually doing that. Are you getting full deflection out of your control surfaces? So again, speaking to the moisture, speaking to potential ice buildups or snow buildups, or potential birds' nests or other obstructions. Is the temperature such that preheating the engine is required before attempting the start on the engine? So every engine is a little bit different, but a good rule of thumb is if it's below +5 degrees Celsius, it's a good idea to preheat your engine. And we're not talking about doing it for 10 minutes and then saying, okay, that's good enough. We, really need to make sure that we're doing a good job of preheating the engine, because often the most damage that's occurred to engines occurs on the startup. And particularly when you've got sluggish oil, you can cause a lot of damage in a hurry. And the last point, as I discussed, any creditors making themselves a nice cozy home in your aircraft. I have seen this firsthand. These photos are not mine, but just examples of some of the things that you can find. I remember from many years ago, a family friend of ours was taking off in their 182 for Sunday breakfast, and they hadn't had it out for a few months. And before they even got airborne, there was smoke starting to come into the cockpit, so they were able to reject the takeoff. And it turned out that there was a big mice nest sitting on top of the engine, much like you see in the photo on the left. The photo on the right won't affect your engine, but it'll sure affect your airspeed. And there's a insect, looks like a bee of some sort, that has tried to make a very, very cozy home inside the pitot tube. And if we're not doing a thorough pre-flight inspection, we might miss that. Perhaps if the insect has passed away, and the cover might remove what part of the insect is on the outside of the pitot tube, but not necessarily on the inside. And our video goes into a little bit more detail on what to look for with pitot tubes. So aircraft conditions, we've got, as I mentioned, the critical surfaces free of contaminants. So this is a question for the chat. See if everybody remembers. Give me some examples of what critical surfaces could potentially be on your aircraft. Does the oil need to be changed after sitting all winter? Are you the type that only changes your oil at the annual once every year, or are you doing it every 6 months? Was your engine pickled and inhibited properly for the winter? What steps need to be done to make sure that your engine's good to go for that first flight? Is the battery going to give your aircraft a boost when you turn the key, or does it need to be charged? So, often we get all excited, we do our pre-flight inspection, everything looks great. We hop in the airplane and we turn that key and nothing happens. So, getting a trickle charger, it's something even you can look for in your pre-flight inspection. People that have electrics in their aircraft, turning on the lights, lowering the flaps if you have electric flaps. Those are all going to be indications of the strength of your battery. The key is that you don't want to leave that battery on for an hour or two while you're updating GPSs or electronic flight bags, that type of thing. So got some good answers coming in here. Ailerons, elevators, leading edge, wings, tail feathers, propeller. Those are all critical surfaces, so that's great. When we're talking about contaminants, it might be something that's just, very minuscule, like frost, that you might, think, well, frost isn't going to be a big deal, but it can be a very big deal. I've got some more answers coming in there. Wings, winglets, horizontal, vertical stabilizers, control surfaces, propellers. For the aircraft with rear-mounted engines, upper surface of the fuselage. That's a very good point. Claude with the canard, also a very good one as well. Lastly, are the tires flat, bald, or cracked? If your aircraft has wheel pants or fairings, when was the last time you actually took them off? You can only see maybe 20%, and I would argue 20% is probably generous of the tire, depending on what type of fairing or wheel pants you have. Maybe it's time to take that off, have a good look at it. You can actually check your tire pressure and know that you're going to be good to go. As John says, flat spots on tires can develop, especially if you're renting an aircraft. That's something that you want to look for. The more circuits an airplane has performed on it, the more odds that you're going to experience that as well. Some more great answers coming in there. So, question from Thomas: what do we do if we find a half pint of water in the fuel tank? So basically, the video is going to talk about that a little bit, but the best thing to do is keep sampling your fuel until you get a clean, free of contaminant test. Rusted brakes as well. Paul, that's a good point. So making sure that your brakes are going to be good to go as well. Operational considerations to think about. Engine priming. So every engine's a little bit different. When in doubt, look at the pilot operating handbook for your specific aircraft. If you're new to the airplane, reach out to somebody that is familiar with the airplane, and they can give you some pointers on that. If the engine doesn't start right away, stop cranking and consider whether to add another shot of prime. Sometimes that can be helpful. Sometimes that can make the situation much worse. If the engine does start, monitor your oil pressure. This is especially critical when we're dealing with cold airplanes. We can sometimes see a big spike in oil pressure right off the bat, and then it'll come back down. The goal for us in general aviation is to make sure if our engine is preheated properly and the oil is preheated properly, it should be the same as if you're flying on a spring, summer, or fall day.
Hey, Clark.
Yeah.
Keeping in track with the oil questions, we have one from Phil Lightstone.
Sure.
And hey, Phil, hope you're doing well. Would you recommend an oil change before the first flight after hibernation?
It's really, I guess it depends on when your oil was changed last. It certainly wouldn't hurt to do that, depending on the type of oil you use. If you're using a thinner oil in the winter, you want to have the proper oil in for the right temperatures. A lot of us are using kind of a multi-season type of oil that generally covers all of the seasons now. But for those of you that aren't, take that certainly into consideration. And there's some other pointers coming in the chat there as well. Priming your engine, hand prop, 4 blades, wait 5 minutes, then start on the first crank. Depending on your aircraft type, that could be helpful. If you are hand propping or pulling your propeller through, make sure that you have the appropriate training to do that. Have somebody show you how to do it before doing it yourself. So Martin says, some say oil should be changed before hibernating to have no contaminants over the winter. I think that's probably the better way of doing it. But if you change your oil before you put it away and then do another oil change just prior to bringing it out of hibernation, that's the way that you're going to be ultimately protected. So there's some more oil tips there in the chat. Moving on, if the engine is carbureted, monitor for carburetor icing on taxi, takeoff, and while in flight. Obviously, if you don't have a carburetor, you don't have to worry about that. But for those of us that are flying carbureted aircraft, we're going to talk a little bit about carburetor icing here. As the slide says, spring weather provides the perfect ingredients for carburetor icing. So I'm going to hide me for a second there. So this chart is from the flight training manual. You've probably seen it if you've leafed through the From the Ground Up publication as well. It's basically showing we've got temperature across the bottom, dew point on the side there, and those days that kind of just above freezing. We've got those nice April days where it's like plus 10. It feels like it's like 25 degrees because it's been minus 10 for so long. You want to get out there and fly. The circuit's nice and busy. Just keep in mind that carburetor ice could be an issue. And I've seen this in some of my instructing. I was instructing on a J3 Cub a couple springs ago, and we were getting carburetor ice taxiing out to the runway. So it can definitely be a factor. So remember that the temperature inside the carburetor, or inside the fuel line there, where the carburetor puts the fuel in and creates the fuel air mixture, can be dropped by as much as 15 degrees Celsius. So even if it's one of those super nice late spring days where it's 20 degrees out, we can have temperatures inside the engine that are as little as 0 to 5 degrees. Next thing, we've got aircraft performance planning. So a really important thing to keep in mind, survival kits. So depending on where you're flying in the country, what time of year you're flying, your survival kit's going to be different for everybody and the type of airplane that you're flying. But it's a very good idea to make sure that your survival kit is updated for the season that you're going to be operating in. You may not necessarily have bug spray in your survival kit in the winter, but you're definitely going to want to have it if you're flying in Northern Ontario in the spring, summer, and fall. In the warmer months, we can remove our winter cowl kits. Cowl blankets are no longer required. We don't need to bring those with us on every flight. Is your weight and balance going to be changed depending on what you're carrying on board? If you're carrying a life raft versus winter blankets and potentially tents and fire starters and all of that, is your weight and balance going to be changed? Next thing, runway conditions. For those of us that fly off of grass runways, we typically have, we spend, March, April, and a little bit of May, depending on your grass runway, looking up at the sky on beautiful, clear days while our airplane would get stuck if we dare ventured out on those grass runways. So really make sure of that. Every grass runway, every surface that's not asphalt or concrete is going to be a little bit different. Even some gravel runways can not have proper drainage. So make sure that you're keeping that in mind. Your runway might be just good enough for you to go flying, but it could affect your takeoff and landing distance numbers as well. So really make sure there's in a lot of the performance charts for takeoffs and landings, there will be a little bit that says add X amount of feet for grass runway conditions. So you're going to want to at least apply that to your calculations. And then the last thing, particularly in higher elevations, as the air warms up, density altitudes are going to increase, and this will reduce your aircraft's takeoff performance. So thinking about the, I believe it's the Red Deer Forestry Airstrip. It's a fantastic airstrip from what I hear out in Alberta. But if you fly into that airstrip this time of year, are you going to be able to fly that same airplane in there in the summer? You're going to want to take that into consideration. When it comes to your aircraft, as Chris Law says, Alaskan bush wheels definitely help. That can take a runway that's kind of on the edge to a perfect surface for flying. So I'll hide me again here. So when we're talking about fuel management, dust off your POH for your aircraft and open up to the performance chart section, and you'll see a chart that looks somewhat similar to this, depending on your aircraft manufacturer. Some will be in a chart format like this. You might see graphs that you're going to need a magnifying glass to get it all lined up. But every aircraft generally has some sort of performance chart. If you're kind of going, flight for best range, flight for best endurance, I remember that very vaguely from my PPL training, but I haven't thought about that in years. These are important things that you want to consider. If your flight for best range, it's what we refer to in glider as your best lift drag ratio speed. Often we refer to it also as your best glide speed for your particular airplane. So you can have a look at that. Flight for best endurance, and this is, we're trying to stay in the air as long as possible. And so a scenario where this might come into play is if we're flying out of an airport that doesn't have a suitable alternate for many miles, and an emergency occurs at that airport, and you have to wait while they clear it up, and there's nowhere else to land. Maybe then you're going to go into flight for best endurance. Maybe you're trying to time build because you're working towards a new license or rating, and you want to know how long you can fly for in your particular airplane at a particular altitude. That's a good thing to review. And what I like to do with my students, and I'm sure your instructor probably did it with you way back when, was finding out the experimental method for best endurance, which is something that's pretty easy to do. You can even do it yourself while you're flying if you like. Basically, you start at your normal power settings for cruise flight, and then either reduce your power by 100 RPM if you're flying with a fixed pitch propeller, or 1 inch of manifold pressure if you're flying with constant speed, and see if the airplane can maintain altitude. And if it does, give it about 15, 20 seconds to stabilize. If it stabilizes and everything's good, reduce it by another 100 RPM or another inch of manifold pressure, and just keep working yourself back till the point where your airplane is now beginning a shallow, gradual descent and can no longer maintain altitude. Then you're going to want to bump that power back up by an inch, back up by 100 RPM, and that's going to be your power setting for flight for best endurance. So, are you ready for that first spring flight? I know I am. That is a picture of my parents' Husky on amphibs at the cottage, and I cannot wait to get get back to that. Before we move on to the next slide, hopefully Sharon can get the next poll ready to go. But I'm curious to hear from everybody here. When was the last time you flew with a flight instructor? So Sharon will get that going. Feel free to answer that. And I saw there was a question that came up in the chat here. How do you best lean mixture within an EGT gauge? Good question. I personally, if it's a fairly simple aircraft, I'm going to use the Cessna 172, 150, 152 Piper Cherokee kind of method. I basically lean it out until you start to get kind of a rough running engine, or you can see a slight rise in RPM on the tachometer, followed by a slight decrease. And then you're just going to want to bump that that mixture in by about 1/4 of an inch, that's generally going to solve that problem there. Yeah, glassy water. That's Lake Baptiste in southern Ontario. It's a fantastic floatplane lake here in southern Ontario, but we can definitely get glassy water conditions, so you do want to be careful with that. So having a look at our poll here, we've got, wow, about almost half of you have flown with a flight instructor in the last year. I am impressed. 25% in the last 3 years, 11% in the last 5 years, and 15% more than 5 years when I finished my last licensure rating. So, and the numbers are holding pretty well steady around there. So that's fantastic. I'm glad to hear that. So for those of you that were in the other half, so the 3 years beyond when I maybe when you finish your last licensure rating, it's an excellent time to call up the local flight school, or even just ask around in your COPA flight. There's often freelance flight instructors, myself included, that are happy to do flight reviews. I do that with a number of my clients that just say, you know what, it's been a little while, especially with the last couple of years. There hasn't been a lot of fly-ins. There hasn't, maybe it didn't get to Oshkosh last year. No sun and fun. It's been a while since you've done any serious flying, and this is going to be a great opportunity to do a flight review with an instructor. Other tips: we're going to review the Unsafe Checklist. As Dominic said, making sure that charts and publications, whether they're paper or digital, are up to date. You want to do that before you get to the airport, so that you're not sitting there going, oh, I really want to be flying right now, and not lose these perfect conditions. Review the latest weather and NOTAMs. Know where to actually find the NOTAMs, whether you're using something like ForeFlight, where they're very easy to find, or whether you're trying to navigate Nav Canada's website with that. And then finally, probably the most important point out of all those tips is to pick a day where there are no stressors to complete that flight. So it's purely for pleasure. There's no mission. There's no, nothing that we absolutely have to do today. And you're going to do much better with that. So the benefits of a flight review, the first one is non-punitive. So that means that you're not going to lose your license. Nobody's going to report you to Transport Canada or anything like that if you struggle with an exercise. It's all about whatever you need for your particular flight and your particular missions that you're doing yourself. So everybody's got different missions. Everybody's got different aircraft. For some people, it's all about just staying in the circuit. Some people have a regular route that they like to do. Other people are planning on going to Saint Jean and Richelieu for the COPA convention. Some things are everybody's going to be a little bit different. Next thing, get somebody to fly with you that regularly flies in your area. It's might be very helpful in Southern Ontario, but if you put me in British Columbia, I will not be able to know the little intricacies of flying in the Lower Mainland in British Columbia. I have done very little general aviation flying out in BC. I'm hoping to do more in the future, but haven't got there yet. You get the chance to have someone offer comments on how to make your flying safer. So they're not necessarily going to say, oh, you did, these 5 things wrong and, you're a terrible pilot. What they're hopefully going to say is, I really like how you do this, this, and this. Here's some things that you can work on, or here's some tips that I find in my own flying that are beneficial, and they might help you out as well. The next one, talking about flight for best range and endurance, a couple of slides back, maybe reviewing some exercises that you haven't done since your own flight training. When was the last time that you did a forced approach? or a simulated forced approach? When was the last time you did a stall if your airplane's approved for it? Maybe there's just an airport that you really want to go to, but you've been kind of nervous because you're traditionally you fly in uncontrolled airspace, and that airport's in controlled airspace, or vice versa. You like the comfort of having air traffic controllers, and you want to venture off somewhere else that's uncontrolled. You can have somebody go with you that knows the ropes. And the last one, there may actually be a financial benefit to this as well. There's potential insurance discounts depending on who you insure your aircraft with. So Unsafe Checklist: illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, and emotions. So illness, that one's fairly straightforward. You could be, experiencing all kinds of things. We're just coming out of COVID, hopefully one of the last waves here for the last time. But there's sometimes very insidious things that could be an illness that you're not necessarily considering. So if you have a head cold, you might feel totally fine at home, but as soon as you get into an airplane, your head feels like it's going to explode. So when in doubt, stay on the ground if you're not feeling the best. And as Jason said, he's added the Unsafe Checklist into his for-flight checklist. So that's a great option that you can do. Medications, making sure that if you've taken any new medication since your last flight, that you've talked to your medical examiner, your CAMI, to make sure that it's approved for flying. Stress. Everybody's got stress in their lives, but is this type of stress going to affect your ability to safely operate an aircraft? As the next one, coming to alcohol, Dennis says 24 hours from bottle to throttle, 3 months from toke to yoke. So one thing that has changed over the last couple of years is the rules regarding alcohol consumption. Used to be 8 hours bottle to throttle in the cars, as we used to say. Now it is 12 hours from the time that you are completely free of alcohol to when you are pilot in command of an aircraft. So just have a quick review of the cars on that. And now that cannabis is legal, it's 28 days is the legal requirement. So for anybody that flies on a semi-regular basis, it's basically no-go. Fatigue. Again, all of us are at varying levels of fatigue. I have a infant at home, so I certainly know all about this. But making sure that you're appropriately rested for the flight, so you're going to have a successful outcome. Sylvia, I see your answer there, or your comment. And then emotions as well. This kind of ties into stress a little bit. If we're really stressed out, we can be very distracted from what we're doing with operating the aircraft. I've had this before with students. A classic one is the dual cross country training for your private pilot license. You're working on, you spend hours beforehand plotting things out on a map, or in this day and age, putting it all into ForeFlight, and you get all your performance numbers. And this particular incident happened before ForeFlight was ubiquitous in general aviation, and their map was sitting on the horizontal stabilizer of the airplane, and we started up, and it ended up getting wrapped around the horizontal stabilizer. And when the student was doing their control check, I happened to see where the map was, and they didn't look because they were kind of rushing through stuff. And so we kind of got out to the edge of the runway, and I said to my student, okay, we're all ready to go. Make sure you have your map ready, and get it folded up, and clip it to your knee board so you're good to go. And he went, oh shoot, where's my map? And I said, look over your left shoulder. And there it was, wrapped around the horizontal stabilizer. And for me, that was the deal breaker for that day. I said, let's go back. We're not in the right headspace to do this flight. So as heartbreaking as it was for the student in that case, they they learned a valuable lesson in that, and he's a professional pilot now. So I hope he carries that forward with him to this day. So last thing before I wrap up, we're gonna have a little question here. So which day is best for that first flight in a long while? So A, getting your spouse, kids, and the family dog loaded into the airplane so you can fly down to Arizona for your March break vacation. B, you and your buddies are all flying to that first spring fly-in at unfamiliar aerodrome. C, a day off from work, where if the flight happens, great. If it doesn't, I can try again another day. And D, taking the morning off from work, but you have to be done by noon so you can make that 1 o'clock meeting. So let's see. We'll keep an eye on the chat here and see what people come up with. I'm seeing a lot of correct answers. That's great. Excellent. That's great. So C is the correct answer. Everybody's getting it in there. So it's all about making sure that the only thing that you're thinking about that day is going for a flight. And if it happens, fantastic. Everybody loves doing that first flight in the spring. And if it doesn't happen, well, darn, we'll try again another time. Excellent. Lots of C answers coming in there. Great. So that's it for my talking bit. And I think, Sharon, we'll maybe do our break now, and then we'll get into the video after the fact.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thanks again, everybody. And whatever flying you get up to in 2022, make sure that you have lots of fun and stay safe.
Let's give everybody a 5-minute break. So it's 7:52 right now. We'll come back at 7:57, and we'll have a little video, a 20-minute video to share, and then following that, we'll have any following lingering questions you might have. I do have to say, Clark, you're a powerhouse. You've been doing a really good job presenting and also checking out the questions. So you're putting Jim and I out of a job here, but we're here. So we'll see everybody at 7:57.
All right. See you then.
All right, we're just about to get started again. What do you think? Should we play the video and then wrap up your presentation with the Q&A, followed by an awesome presentation from Infinite Flight, who Jason had mentioned is one of our proud new partners. What do you think, Clark?
Sounds great.
Okay.
I'll introduce the video there. So this is my personal mechanic and good friend of mine. He also is the partner in the aircraft that I now fly. James Powell is a Class 1 instructor and a AME based out of Peterborough, Ontario. He has a YouTube channel called Fastback Aviation, Fastback Flying. So feel free to check that out afterwards. If you find that this video, you want to pause it and, kind of go over some of the steps that he's talking about in it, feel free to look it up on YouTube and along with many of his other flying adventures. So without further ado, we'll start the video, returning to flying.
Welcome to the channel and welcome to the hangar. I want to talk a little bit about getting back into flying. Spring's coming, hopefully, fingers crossed. We're looking forward to getting out there in some warmer weather, and I thought I'd make a bit of a video today on getting back into flying after it's been a while since you did so. I'm talking a couple months. So that's going to be the main focus, just to go over a couple of points, sort of a checklist to help you get back into flying after a bit of an absence. But I think this would be useful for everybody because sometimes we just don't think about these things, or we can get going and everything becomes sort of automatic, and maybe it's time we actually did check off a couple of these items and made sure we had everything that we needed to do. So obviously, if we haven't flown in quite a while, we might want to check some documents to start with, kind of really planning to get back into flying here. Let's take a look at our medical. When's it due? Do I need to book an appointment? Do I need to get that done? That's been trickier with the COVID situation. So maybe planning that ahead of time and not ending up in a situation where you lose your medical because you can't get an appointment or the wait times are really great. So I know that's something that's really easy to slip the mind. So thinking right there, taking a look at your document booklet, checking your license, checking your validity periods on your IFR and on your actual medical itself. Aircraft documents as well. I mean, when was the last time you reviewed and made sure you had everything that you needed for the flight? Journey book, certificate of registration, certificate of airworthiness, insurance, so on and so forth. So I think you want to make a bit of a checklist, starting with some really basic items that we maybe don't necessarily think of before every flight, even though we should, and work your way through those, especially if you have been away from the airplane for a little while, because you want to make it really nice and simple, and we don't want any incidents or accidents or scaring ourselves in the aircraft. So look at your medical, look at your license, and see what the status there is. Now, if we've been away from the airplane for a while, hopefully your airplane will have a pilot operating handbook. And hopefully you've read it at some point. And if you haven't, or if it's been a while, maybe it's a really great opportunity to dig back into that pilot operating handbook. We want to review things like speeds, climb speed, VX, VY, maneuvering speed, best glide speed. We want to have a good look at emergencies. When was the last time you practiced a forced approach? I got a video for forced approaches, so I'll put that link below. You can check that out. Maybe that'll be helpful, and maybe it's time to get out and practice a forced approach from the downwind to the runway or out in the practice area to a farmer's field. Reading the POH, maybe coupling that with a few other training items like the flight training manual would be a really great asset to get your mind back into the flying and to make sure that you're prepared. So speeds, emergencies, weight and balance. Let's have a review of weight and balance. Some airplanes it's really simple, very straightforward. Other aircraft can get a little more complex. So let's make sure we're comfortable with those ahead of time. Now with speeds, with POH, with checklists, when was the last time you did a check flight? Has it been 10 years or 15 years since you went with an instructor? Just going with any instructor is not much good. You really want someone who's proficient, good at flying the airplane, and can assist you and aid you in your flying. Depending on your area and depending on the aircraft you may have, you may not find an instructor with those skills, so you might be looking at just a more qualified, competent pilot who has flown the aircraft more recently or has a lot more experience on it. It might be worthwhile setting up going and flying with someone a lot more experienced. You just need to be careful about any implications that might have on who's flying the airplane, what are we doing in the actual event of an emergency, are we actually providing instruction here, or is this just sort of a review flight, and is there any insurance implications along there? So obviously, a lot of stuff like CFS now is all going to be digital, and a lot of us have got electronic flight bags, so we can get all of our maps, charts, publications in there. Let's have a review of those. Let's have a look at the Aeronautical Information Manual and review some airspace and radio procedures, because these are things that I certainly see flying regularly that are becoming very poorly done by a lot of pilots. Not joining the circuits correctly, not overflying airports at the correct altitude. These are really basic things that we shouldn't be getting wrong. So if you've been away from flying and you want to get back in, let's start with some real basic long game stuff. When's my medical due? When's my aircraft annual due? What's the status around that? And then build yourself back in by reviewing your documents, reviewing your operating handbook, taking a look at some emergencies, and deciding or not whether you should have a flight with an instructor or a more qualified person. So hopefully that's something you thought about, but if not, I think it'll really help. Next, you want to pick a good day. Don't get yourself rushed. Don't have something else to do that day. Don't go on a day where the weather is bad or the winds are really high if you haven't been in a while. Start with the simple things. Walk, then run. Start with a nice day, then you can go on windier days or worse weather days and build your confidence back up in a slow and safe manner. But push yourself. You always want to push yourself to go somewhere new, go to a new airport, experience different runways, different traffic patterns, controlled airspace. But you've got to do the studying, you've got to do the research ahead of time to make sure you're prepared. Now, next, what we should look at is, if you haven't been flying for a while and you own your own airplane, getting your aircraft out of storage. You didn't have your aircraft in storage? That's interesting. Anytime it's sitting for a long period of time, like plus 30 days, we want to be thinking about putting some items in place to protect that aircraft. Batteries, fuel systems, engine. Okay, so if you haven't put it into storage and it's been a few months, something to consider for next time. But in any case, we'll take a look around the airplane here and look at what we would do to bring it back into flying service, which is basically just an extensive walk around. But it might need to be, we come down the day beforehand and check tire pressures, boost the battery, or trickle charge it if it's necessary, and just kind of, again, familiarizing ourselves with the airplane, with flying, and getting our mind back into a good headspace so that we don't rush, we don't make mistakes, we don't scare ourselves. And that's the other thing, we're not taking passengers if we haven't flown in a while, okay? And there's regulations even on what our passenger carrying rules are. So that's what we're going to look at. So we'll take a good look around the airport, and I'll point out a couple of items that could maybe get missed if we haven't gone in a while. We'll start with our nice extensive walk around. If you haven't done one for a while, again, your operating handbook, obviously this is not the one for this airplane, but it's just an example for you, has a nice way to do a pre-flight, start, endpoint. If in doubt, just follow it, follow through your checklist, and get everything done. Great way to make sure you're doing what you need to. Overall condition of the airplane, if you've been away from it a while. Has it been damaged? Has anything bumped into it? Antenna security. Okay. Struts. And these type of flying wires always like to ping and make sure the tone is right. Okay, we're looking at hinges. Checking lubrication. All right, tire. Pressure. Obviously an important one. Tread. Is there sufficient tire and tread left? Okay, we've got full motion on the control surface without any binding or grinding or anything getting in the way. It's amazing the animals and rodents that can get into an aircraft, or the damage that can be done, especially if you're sharing hangar space with someone else. And I've fixed lots of those before for people. So that's what you're looking for if you've been away from the aircraft for a long time and it's been in storage. All right, look at that. Got a screw not done up all the way. Okay, screws will rattle out in flight, and that may be something that was missed from a little while ago, or some maintenance was done and it wasn't done up all the way. Checking bolts, hardware, attaching point, hinges. This is nothing special right now. This is just a walk around. Again, the key is you're taking your time. You're not got a meeting, you know, right afterwards, or a family picnic or something like that. You don't want to be rushed when you're doing this, especially if you haven't been at it for a while. You're going to just, you know, slowly paint yourself into a corner, and then that's how you end up wrecking it. So don't have bad weather approaching and you're trying to get out ahead of it. You know, you might even come down and do this really thoroughly the day before you go flying. Just getting your head back into the flying. Don't ever blow directly into a pitot tube, okay? If you're in doubt that it's not functioning properly, you have someone blow by it, not on it, but near it, while someone else watches the airspeed indicator, or set your phone up in the cockpit with a camera running so it can see it if you're on your out. All right. Now, here's a great one. Wheel pants, wheel spats, whatever you want to call them. Plane shoes, I think my wife calls them. They really hide tires. These ones aren't too terrible, but cuts, nicks, and inflation can be very hard to determine correctly with them installed. So if you haven't flown in a while, it's probably a good idea to check those tire pressures with an actual gauge, and you may need to take the wheel pan off to do so. All right. Cowling, open it up as best you can. We may need to put a trickle charge on the battery to top it up, especially if you've got any electronic clocks or digital clocks that run off of battery power and it's been a few months. That battery could be very discharged. So save yourself some stress and aggravation. Get it boosted the day before. Checking hoses, clamps, connections, magnetos, P-leads. It's, again, just a walk around. We're going to check oil quantity. Do we need an oil change? You know, what's the status there? Looking at plugs to make sure they're tight. We've got all of our nuts on. Gaskets are good. You know, nothing's missing. Nothing's broken. Nothing's living or moved in. Belt tension. Okay, these are all good things we can check. Landing gear as we go by. Exhaust. Okay. Don't forget to check the quantity of fuel. I mean, good heavens, that one is easily missed, especially if you're distracted. And that's the big one. We're creatures of habit, and there's nothing like someone showing up in the middle of your walk around to distract you, especially if you haven't done one in a while. Yeah, I think we need fuel before we go anywhere in this one. Gallons. Not exactly a lot. So we'll make sure we got sufficient fuel for the flight, taking into consideration any delays you might have or unexpected occurrences, like the airport gets closed because somebody has an accident because they rushed and got themselves into trouble. You make sure you got enough fuel to get to the next nearest airport, or enough fuel to do a couple of overshoots yourself if it's going to take more than one to get back. You don't need to be stressing out about fuel. If you have an aluminum propeller, careful about dragging your hand down the leading edge. If you've got any sharp nicks or burrs in there, you could really hurt yourself. I would open up the other side of the cowling and check it out, because why not? We haven't gone in a while. I won't do that right now, so don't make the video too long, but that would be something to check. Okay, again, bolts. We'll be having a really close look around the brake, any hydraulic fluid, any oil leakage, fuel samples, right? Definitely want to be checking those fuel samples. Okay, perfect. Is that absolutely 100% water or 100% fuel? Kind of hard to tell in this test tube. It's a little discolored, it's a little old. The nose gives it away, okay? But I could fill that up with water and it would look the same. So I've seen that a number of times where people take a sample, it looks nice and clear like that, but it's all water. So you really do want to smell it and double check, especially if it's been a while and the aircraft has been full of fuel. If the temperature's been fluctuating a lot, it could have been building condensation. I'll put a picture up of a couple that have come out with water in them, and it normally takes quite a few checks before you get it. We would check the rest of this side here and back to where we started.
Okay, I hope you found that a helpful video. The idea was not to do a walk around, and there's different ways to do walk arounds, but really just make sure you're getting all the items listed in the operating handbook. You're doing it before each flight, and you're doing it, I think, for best results the same way each time so that it's consistent. Try and make sure you don't get distracted while doing the walk around, and try and make sure that you really are looking and not just skimming over things. I really hope 2022 is going to be a better year for all of us for flying. Maybe a few less travel restrictions will help us all get out there and enjoy general aviation a lot more. If you've been away for a while because of that or because of the weather over the winter time, I really do think it's a great idea to give yourself a checklist and work through it, right from when's the maintenance due on the plane, when's the medical due for me, and then reviewing your operating procedures, your handbook, your emergency procedures, your airspeeds, really going through the aircraft in some detail if it hasn't flown in a while, and then getting back into the air in a really calm, relaxed way. There's nothing like having lots of time and being relaxed to really enjoy what you're getting back into. Hopefully you can find some new adventures in aviation this year. Maybe a float rating, or getting a tail checkout, maybe adding a new airplane type, or maybe doing some aerobatics. Keep pushing the boundaries, keep getting out there and flying, and remember, you got to keep studying and practicing these things. We'd love to hear your comments. We'd love to hear from you on other videos you might like to see, maybe how to fly precautionary approach or something like that. And get flying, get out there, stay safe. Happy tailwinds, everyone.
All right. So my thanks to James Powell, Fastback Aviation, for putting that together for us. He not only works out of Peterborough, but he's also mobile. So if you're in Southern Ontario and you're looking for a new AME, feel free to check him out. If you're a little bit further afield, he's got a great YouTube channel. He's flown all over Canada in a number of his aircraft there. So I guess, Sharon, I noticed there was a couple of questions that we didn't address. You want to do that now, or we can check those out if you like?
Yes, let's go through it. I was very, very bad at the multitasking there, so I just plugged her scholarship because James had a really good comment on go chasing some other, trying some new stuff out. And for anyone who's looking for some financial support for that, we do have a scholarship right now that might be of interest to you. Any COPA member over the age of 18 can apply for it. Let me take you back off the full screen here. I see Jim is on stage. There we go. So there was a question on why not to blow directly into the pitot tube.
So I think I will preface this as that I am not a mechanic to start with, but I think the issue is you can apply too much pressure to the pitot tube, like to the airspeed indicator mechanism itself. If you think about the mechanism is designed up to a maximum airspeed. We'll call it airspeed. If you're blowing directly into it, you might apply more force than the instrument itself is actually designed to withstand. Other things, believe it or not, not all of our mouths are clean. So you may actually project some sort of contaminant into the pitot tube inadvertently. So, the idea of kind of blowing around it is, hopefully, that contaminant is not going to hit directly. And you're also really all you're looking for is, we're not looking for a specific calibrated speed based on the amount that you're blowing into the pitot tube. Really, it's about, is the airspeed going to become alive? Is it going to increase when the airplane starts to move forward? By putting a little bit of air in the general area of the pitot tube, you should see an increase in your airspeed, indicated airspeed, while the airplane's parked.
Okay, I learned a lot from just that answer alone. It sounds like you really lucked out with a good friend there.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. Yeah.
Very informative. Jim, I see you're back on, and I see some questions in here. If you could draw some out.
Yeah, interestingly, I've been dropping off the game, so and the questions disappear. But I do note too that I did note from before. One was back to when you were talking about weather, Clark, and it was around, and I'm going to let you answer this, airframe icing outside of cloud.
Yes. So that can certainly happen. An example I had, this was years ago when I was instructing full time, but I was flying in the fall, and the freezing level was supposed to be at a higher altitude than we were. We were doing a night flight in a 172, and we were completely out of cloud. There wasn't seemingly any precipitation that we could detect. But all of a sudden, flying around Southern Ontario, there's lots of lights. I joke it's almost like flying during the day at night in Southern Ontario because it's, there's just so much light pollution. But all of the lights started to become like a little hazy, and it was kind of like, if you had cataracts or something like that, you just couldn't see things very clearly. And what had happened was there was ice starting to form on the windshield of the aircraft. And we were fortunate that we had bubble windows on this 172. And so on the curvature of the window on either side of the cockpit, you could see a little sliver forward. So when you leaned over, one way or the other, you could see a very clear picture of the lights in front of you. And then if you sat up straight, it would go hazy again. So definitely can happen. It's something, especially if you're flying in reduced visibilities or reduced horizon, you're going to want to be very cognizant of that. Especially early on in the spring, when in doubt, if there's any precipitation, best to stay on the ground.
Okay, great. The other one, which was a little longer that I'm going to try and paraphrase, but was around snow squalls or streamers off of the Great Lakes.
Sure.
And if there was any tips or ideas on, either flying through it or should you just be going around it?
Sure.
Obviously, taking into account freezing levels, forecasts, all those kind of things.
Absolutely. So streamers are kind of Mother Nature's windsock is how I like to describe it. So if you look at a radar map in Southern Ontario, we have all of those Great Lakes around us, so we get lots of lake effect snow. And what you'll see is streamers coming off, in the Toronto area. Generally, it's off of Georgian Bay. The prevailing winds out of the northwest. So the line is typically going from northwest to southeast in kind of a, right to the bottom right corner of your screen kind of direction. And the speed of the wind, typically it's at or near the surface. So we're looking at, up to, 3,000 to 5,000 feet is where you're going to see lake effect streamers. So above that, if you can climb above them, say, your VFR over the top, or you have an instrument rating, you can get on top and just get over top of those. But the streamers themselves, the length of the streamer typically has to do with the speed of the wind. So if it's calmer winds, you're not going to get the streamers stretching nearly as far away from that body of water. If you've got, 15 gusting 25 or greater winds, you can see those streamers stretch, 20, 25 miles from the body of water. So it really depends on the conditions. Best to avoid them if you can. Typically, it's drier snow. If you happen to fly into one, I don't want to say it all the time, but there's lots of times where it's going to be dry snow. It's not going to adhere. But that being said, visibility can drop very quickly in a streamer. And if you're not instrument rated and you're not on an IFR flight plan, you probably shouldn't be there.
Excellent advice, and I'm going to add some personal notes to this one for the sake of this. So I did have the pleasure of working in Toronto Buttonville Flight Service for a very long period of time in the late 90s and early 2000s. So saw lots of that, and I'm going to refer back to those weather books that you had talked about from Nav Canada. So excellent source. They're actually written by local flight service for the most part. So it is local knowledge that is really what they're comprised of. And interestingly, the lake effect snow was one that I actually contributed. So you did very, very well on that one.
Oh, good. Good. Great.
Very good. Maybe we'll take one or two more questions, and I definitely want to wrap up of just addressing, you're an important contributor to the COPA community. So I'd love to ask a question on that in a couple moments. Is there another a question that draws your attention, Jim? Perhaps I did see one on does a biannual instrument proficiency check flight with a TC CFI pilot count as a flight review?
So technically, a flight review doesn't necessarily meet, like there's it depends. If it's a flight review just because you feel like you're a little rusty and you want to improve your proficiency, or is this a flight review to meet insurance requirements? If it's to meet the insurance requirements, you're going to want to check with your insurance provider because they may have specific exercises that you need to accomplish in order to consider it a quote unquote flight review. If you're just doing it because you want to be proficient, the biannual instrument proficiency check, that's the IPC, can count. However, they're going to provide some feedback, but they're not going to provide a lot of feedback on aircraft operations and things that are kind of outside of the scope of the IPC itself. So it's certainly something that is worth considering. I know my dad's a GA IFR pilot, and leading up to his IPC is usually when we do a lot of our flight instructing together. I go up and make him do holds and things that he doesn't typically do in his normal flying. But that is every 2 years, and it's a good idea, especially if you haven't flown in a little while, to make it an annual event.
Awesome. I jumped in there as you were taking a look at those questions, Jim. Did any others stand out to you?
There's none others that I have that are really pressing ones. We of course can review through it and see if there's anything we missed. There is one more sort of a generic one that just came through the chat, which is actually about on the English proficiency exam. Is it a mandatory, or is it necessary, or is it discretion of an instructor?
So that's it's basically there's an English language proficiency evaluation that has to be conducted, and there are I have to remember this. Not 100% sure on this, but I had a student last summer that we kind of went through this, and I believe if you have a high school diploma from a Canadian school, that they consider you to be either proficient in English or in French. But best to, when in doubt, talk to Transport Canada examiner on that. But otherwise, the other option, if it's been a long time since you're in high school, perhaps, is to actually just do the proficiency test. Usually, it's just a phone conversation with somebody that's designated by Transport Canada to conduct the exam, and typically they just kind of have a bit of a conversation, and usually it's pretty brief.
Okay.
Very good. Yes, I definitely had a personal question that I just thought might be worthwhile. Is, you know, you've played a big role within the community as one of our board members. So maybe you have a favorite memory to share or a particular experience, because you've been on many committees, supported many events. So you can't really choose one out of quite a handful. But if there's any that come to mind to share with the group here.
Yeah, I mean, just, you know, thinking about it on the spot, I mean, you know, one of the things, I'm leaving the board in June, but you know, COPA holds a place in my heart, always will. But what got me into the board was really our strategic planning process that we went through about 4.5 years ago, and I came onto that committee as a member at large, and it was something I was asked to do by one of the board members at the time, and that kind of snowballed into me actually being on the board and then being the chair of that strategic planning committee. And part of that process was to help bring Christine Gervais onto the COPA team. So you know, I think really just being a member of the board was a wonderful opportunity, and it gave me the opportunity to kind of leave my mark on COPA, and I hope that I can help from the sidelines going forward as a member at large. But I'm going to take the opportunity to make a quick plug, because we've got our nomination window is open right now. If any of you are considering running for the board, please submit your name. We've got elections across the country. British Columbia, Yukon, Northern Ontario, Southern Ontario, and Quebec are all up for grabs this spring. So please, if you're thinking about it, we'd love to see your name on the list.
That's great. I'll definitely put the link in the chat. Thank you very much for this awesome presentation. I think we'll have to invite you back by popular demand, Clark. So with that, I'm going to share a commercial or just a short video from our sponsor, SiriusXM, and that will be followed by a concluding presentation from Infinite Flight. Okay, let me get that started.
I'm Jeff Owen. I have about 1,300 hours. I have ratings single engine land, single engine sea, multi-engine land, tailwheel endorsement. I'm halfway through my instrument rating, so my instructor is walking me through icing, really important, obviously. Winds aloft, some of the additional features. In fact, just a week ago, we paged through every button on the XM Weather, Sirius XM Weather page, just to find out what's out there. I was actually startled at how much I was missing. Well, I like that it's accessible on the ground. It's great flight planning, especially in a slower airplane, even in the air cam. Just being able to access and plan on the ground before you take off is a big plus for me.
Okay, awesome. That was a fantastic video from SiriusXM. They're a huge supporter of COPA, so always glad to share some messaging from them. Jason, We are very excited to hear from you. So yes, Infinite Flight, Jason's a member, of course. He had mentioned that at the beginning. And there was a few questions on what is that 90-day trial that Jason was talking about. So there is a special partnership that COPA has established with Infinite Flight. We are working on establishing as many strategic partnerships as possible. You'll see it in our a March magazine, on a few others that we had just signed on. So many, many benefits are coming your way. Keep an eye on the members only section for taking advantage of those benefits. And so we're very excited to find different ways to bring folks into aviation. And so giving a tool to use, whether you want to become more familiar with some flying for yourself or to share with others. We personally were looking for it to use it for our COPA for Kids program, now named Discover Aviation. So some tools for our COPA flights. I have used it, and I don't want to take away from your presentation. I've used it. It's a very fun flight simulator software. It has incredible animations of different airports all around the world. So with that, Jason, could you tell us more about Infinite Flight and your background itself?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Sharon. And thanks everyone for sticking around all the way to the end to listen to my presentation. Maybe Sharon, if you can get that up on the screen for me. We can do the video first if you want.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'll put the presentation on there.
Sounds
second.
Good.
There we go.
So yeah, today we'll look at just a brief overview of what Infinite Flight is and what it's capable of. And again, I want to say thank you to COPA for this cool new sponsorship that we have, or partnership that we have. And we're just excited to enter into this, something new for us, and I think something a little bit new for COPA. So yeah, let's get moving. So my name is Jason, and I work in digital marketing and partnership development here at Infinite Flight. And I've been part of the team since 2018. I'm a brand new private pilot. I've been flying for about a year now, and I'm based here in Parry Sound, Ontario. And I've been a COPA member. I started out as a free member when I was a student pilot, and I, of course, have carried on since then. And as of a couple of weeks ago, I'm a brand new aircraft owner. I own half of a Piper Cherokee, and my aviation partner, Jordan, is here watching. So Jordan, hi. Our first annual is happening right now. So maybe just say a little prayer for us. We're about to get the bill. But I've been flying this airplane now for a year. I've put about 75 hours on it, just renting block time. So very fortunate to be able to do that. That's a little bit about me. And just as Dominic pointed out earlier in the presentation, you know, we as pilots, we know that being safe and proficient is really important. So you want to be a safe pilot. And if you're not flying every day, or maybe your airplane's put away and tucked in for the winter, it usually means finding a way to keep your head in the game with presentations like this, or other ways, but watching YouTube videos, or just some way to keep at it mentally. Infinite Flight creates a low cost, low barrier to entry way to keep things like couch flying and learning new EFB features and taking those to the next level and keeping it easy, helping you to be a safer pilot. And we just happen to make a flight simulator. So, and on a personal note, I did my flight training while working for the Infinite Flight team. And the team said, you know, Jason, try to think of objective ways to use Infinite Flight during your training and report back to us. So, of course, I was happy to do that. And I am not great at math, and knowing this and knowing that pilots need to use math, and it was a worry of mine going into flight training. And so what I would do is I would spread out my VNC on the floor here in my office, and get my paper nav log and my ruler and my E6B, and actually fly my cross-country routes with Infinite Flight, since we have real-world winds aloft and density altitudes, etc. And I would do my cross-country flights, and that would allow me to visualize my set heading point and my my points along the route by looking out the aircraft window as I navigated. So it was a huge help for me in sort of doing my cross country flights. And I know you can use ForeFlight's 3D view to do this. But as you know, in Canada, we as students have to not use the EFB and the iPad and everything, and we use paper. So this was a great way for me to do that before I had to pay a flight instructor or pay for any avgas. So what is Infinite Flight? Excuse me. We are a mobile flight simulator. We work, our app works on mobile devices like phones and tablets exclusively for iOS and Android. We're a free download in the App Store or Google Play. So you can download and get flying right away. And some pilot uses for Infinite Flight would include, flying to and from any airport. So practicing going in and out of a new airport that you haven't been to before. Navigation practice, as I just mentioned. We have real world winds aloft, density, altitude, weight and balance, fuel burn. You can practice any number of different approaches and instrument procedures in equipped aircraft or in any aircraft and using our HUD view. We have dozens of aircraft, and like I said, it's great for practicing with your EFB. Okay, so how does Infinite Flight work? Like I said, it's designed for exclusively for mobile devices. What it does is it uses your device's accelerometer and your gyroscope to mimic the aircraft's yoke, stick or side stick action. So you're actually tilting or turning the device. Other control surfaces or control elements like your throttle, your rudder, spoiler, flap, those are all controlled using our 2D button interface. And I'll get into a little bit more of that as we go. And all you need is an internet connection to get going. So a lot of our cockpits have animated instruments. You can see in the screenshot here, this is YTM. That's the airplane that I trained on here in Parry Sound with Near North Aviation. So I had a little bit of pull, so I was able to get the airplane livery and the company logo on the airplane for them in the sim. But our older aircraft models are constantly being upgraded so that we have animated glass and steam cockpits. Other 2D button actions that you saw in the previous screenshot would include autopilot, ways to tune approaches or tune the ILS, GPS, VORs, etc. And then actions like pushing back from the gate, opening windows and doors, and a new feature, which is docking with jet bridges at airports. Some questions we get, before I move on, some questions we get sometimes are, why are your aircraft cockpits not interactive? And we've just found that unlike a desktop sim where you have big screen real estate, sometimes physical controls, we don't have that. And so on the smaller screens, especially on a phone, it gets a bit clunky when you're trying to zoom in and actually use controls and touch them. So especially in high workload phases of flight, like landings and approaches. So we stick with our 2D button interface, and we find that it's actually a lot easier for mobile pilots to do that. Replay mode's another interesting feature that we've implemented a little while ago, which allows playback of any flight. So you can review, and this can be exported and shared. It's not storing big video files, it's storing states as you fly. So you can actually replay, scrub to any portion of the flight, and take super HD screenshots if you like, rather than just using the device's screenshot feature. And this can be handy if you're a flight instructor and you want to demonstrate to a student, but you don't want to go to all the trouble of getting in the air and getting to altitude and everything. You can pull up a replay and scrub to the point that you want to show the student and demonstrate that way. Flight plans. So planning the flight in Infinite Flight is quick and easy by simply tapping on waypoints, just like you might do in your EFB, like ForeFlight or Garmin Pilot. You can see here in the screenshot the flight plans on the left. And then you can actually click on any airport in the world and select from that airport's published procedures. We have a global navigation database that includes waypoints and things like VORs and NDBs and all published procedures. So you can choose from SIDS, stars, approaches, and include those in your flight plan. And just like ForeFlight would, if you remove a waypoint from a SID or a star, it'll just break the SID or star into individual waypoints. You can move waypoints up and down in your flight plan and rearrange them, and you can assign altitudes to them. The published procedures will have altitudes included, which will be used in VNAV. If you have autopilot engaged and you want to use VNAV for your descent, you can also override all of these altitudes and put in your own. I like to put one in just before 10,000 feet so I don't overspeed the aircraft on my descent, as a reminder. You can also copy and import flight plans from ForeFlight, local storage, and more. And in our multiplayer mode, you can actually select another aircraft and copy the other pilot's flight plan as well. A unique feature at Infinite Flight is our built-in ATC. So for a really immersive experience, you can actually be vectored by ATC. What you're seeing here on the screen is our ATC interface. So we have human air traffic controllers on our expert server. So if you have gained a certain level of experience in Infinite Flight, you can have access to our expert server, where we have over 500 expert server controllers who have actually been vetted by taking a written test and taking a practical test with our training team, who are all volunteers. So there we have users that are pilots and users that are ATC. Our ATC crew is run by our team member Tyler, who's a real world air traffic controller in the United States. Okay, so as Sharon was mentioning before, COPA members get a free 90-day trial to Infinite Flight Pro. So it's not a magazine subscription. It's a subscription to a set of features in Infinite Flight that can take your experience to the next level. So with your subscription, you can fly to over 30,000 airports worldwide. We have a 3D airport, a growing list of 3D airports around the world that we're adding to with every release. Typically, lately, we've been doing almost monthly releases. And on our last one, we had almost 40 airports that were released in 3D. So chances are, if your airport isn't in 3D, there might be one close by, or one that you've always wanted to fly into. And you can see in this screenshot, we have 3D objects on the ground and terminals and things like that. And this is our multiplayer environment. So we have our global navigation database that you have access to. We have multiplayer flight across 3 servers. You start out on our casual server where there are no rules and you can fly upside down in a 747 through a airport airspace. And then you make your way up to the training server where you can give ATC a try, if that's your thing, and make your way up eventually to the expert server, and where all rules are enforced. And our controllers have access to ATIS, ground, tower, and radar frequencies such as approach, departure, and center. You have access with your Pro subscription to dozens of aircraft and almost 1,000 livery and aircraft combinations. Everything ranging from general aviation to commercial and military. We have live weather conditions, so you can fly it in day or night, and the time will progress with you. If you'd like to have a sunset flight, we have real world winds aloft that are constantly updating. And like I said before, weight and balance, real-time fuel burn, and you can use all of these things to practice your navigation skills. We have global 15 meter per pixel HD satellite terrain imagery. So when you're up in the flight levels, we have beautiful views as you fly around. And Clark's saying that's a beautiful Dash 8. Yes, this is Clark's home base right here at City Center with his Chariot there. And then you have access with all 3 servers and multiplayer. You have access to all of our community events. So another really cool feature to Infinite Flight is taking that couch flying, like I said, to the next level with practicing using your EFB. Infinite Flight works with popular EFBs like ForeFlight and Garmin Pilot. I know ForeFlight's a sponsor here, so we'll highlight that one in the screenshot. And this, what Infinite Flight does is it provides attitude and GPS position information while you're in flight. And you can share flight plans between ForeFlight and Infinite Flight and vice versa. Just like you would from ForeFlight to your instrument panel, maybe in your aircraft. You can practice VOR nav or approaches using the VOR receiver in equipped aircraft cockpits like our 172, or simply use the HUD-View HSI. You can see here on my screenshot that I'm navigating from Parry Sound down to Waterloo via the Midland and the Mans VOR with the ILS 26 approach tuned in. And you can see the live traffic here. There's other Infinite Flight traffic positioned at Toronto Pearson there. So you'll see live traffic from our servers in addition to your own aircraft in ForeFlight. And again, this feature does work with Garmin Pilot with their simulator mode turned on. So that's an overview of Infinite Flight. I've tried to keep it really brief for you, but we'd love to have you on board and we'd love to chat with you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them now, but if you're a flight instructor who wants more information, we're still wanting to break more into the real world pilot aviation market. And that's a good reason for me to be here today. But if you're a flight instructor and you want to know more, let's have a chat. I'd be happy to walk you through it and maybe even extend your subscription a little bit. For technical support, you can email support at the email address there. And our user guide is at infiniteflight.com/guide. There's lots of great info there. It's really, really comprehensive. And our team has put together a really great guide that you can search. And our YouTube tutorials are put together by our ATC community manager, Tyler, and myself. And you can see all of those at youtube.com/infiniteflight for a lot more in-depth view than what I've provided here. And you can find us on social media, Infinite Flight. We'd love to say hi. And for community events and a very, very lively and vibrant community, you can check out community.infiniteflight.com. So that's it for me. I don't know if there are any questions, but maybe Sharon, if you want to come and help me here. I'm
Absolutely.
happy to do that.
That was a great presentation. Thank you so much. I think there was some pretty awesome features in there, the ATC or the connection with ForeFlight and Garmin. So glad that you drew on that. Yes, we definitely do have a few questions. What I saw a few that asked on device specific of which Apple versus Android. It's usually a topic within this world, but also finding the app itself within the App Store.
Sure.
And ensuring they're downloading the right Infinite Flight.
Yeah, sure. So Apple or Android, we actually would, if given the choice and money's not an object, we would suggest that you go for Apple. And iOS is just a little bit better because they have better thermal management. And this is a little bit above my pay grade, but they don't reduce the CPU and GPU frequency as much as Android. And in addition to that, there are thousands of different Android devices on the market. And so it's harder for us to develop and cater to all of those devices, although we do try. So we would suggest you go for a current generation iPad for the best experience. My iPad Mini 6, which I run ForeFlight on, is perfect 50 or 60 frames per second all the time in infinite flight, no question. But you can also use, a 1-year-old device. We do support 5, 6, 7-year-old devices, although you'll have to reduce your quality settings to get a good flight experience.
Very good. I see a question on whether or not infinite flight simulates RNAV approaches.
If it is now I'm not an instrument rated pilot, so I'm sorry if I don't answer this correctly, but if it's a published approach that is so we have FAA data for the US and the rest of the globe is provided by NavBlue. So, and NavBlue is an Airbus company. So we do have global navigation data from them. So if the RNAV approach is in that data set, then yes, we do have that.
Okay, very good. I think it would be good to end with this last question, tying back to the trial here that COPA members are all entitled to. Again, so check out your members only section in a. We'll send out an email when it's ready to go. But so the benefit is 90 days free for Infinite Flight Pro. Can users just use Infinite Flight?
Yes. And actually, is it okay if we play the video just so I can get a chance to sneak it in there while I answer that one? All right, I'll cue that up. I'll just turn down the volume here. So this is just me in my office, and I'm in Victoria, BC, on our multiplayer server. I had the place to myself here, so but you can just see how you can pan around with the controls and use some of the 2D interface. And I'll just answer that subscription question. So when you download Infinite Flight, you won't be able to fly at Victoria like this, but we do have a set of regions that you can fly in for free. So you can fly in the New York region, the Southern California, and then there's a whole bunch of different areas around the world that you can fly in. And you're confined to those regions, and then you can fly in the
Victoria
steam gauge.
Unicum. Infinite Flight 0 is taking off runway 27, remaining in the pattern.
So you can fly in these areas. You can fly in the 172, the steam gauge. If you want to use the G1000 version, then you have to have your subscription. The subscription unlocks the entire globe, all of our multiplayer and ATC, and all of our aircraft and liveries. So those are the main benefits. You don't have to be confined to certain regions. One thing you heard the ATC call there. You'll hear some Americanisms as you're flying, like remaining in the pattern. We would use the word circuit. You'll hear things like Victoria Unicom. We would say Victoria Traffic, and they would actually say traffic, I think, in most places in the United States too. So there are some verbiage differences, but yeah, this is the gist of flying in the circuit, and you have to mind your speed and your flap
Victoria
setting.
Unicum. Infinite Flight 0 is on final. Runway 27.
So this video, I think, Sharon, will end, and hopefully people have been able to hear me talk over it after we land. But there's a good question from Neil. Neil is wondering how much it costs for a subscription to Infinite Flight Pro. So as we said before, the subscription you can have for 90 days for free as a COPA member. You just have to go to the website, to the member only section, and go for the member discount area, and you'll see a link to a page where you can do that. A pro tip here is to suggest to do this on your mobile device, because we provide a link that takes you straight to the App Store to redeem. And if you're already on your mobile device, that makes it a lot easier. But the subscription is $9.99 a month US. And I think that works out to, it's different in every country based on currency exchange and tax. but it works out to, I think, about $13.49 or something Canadian per month. So after your subscription, your 90 days, your free trial is over, your 90 days, it will just continue to be billed in 1 month increments.
Very good. I use it on my Android, and I will definitely download it on my iPad Air. I'm very excited for the difference in experience. So looking forward to that. Thank you so much, Jason.
My pleasure.
We're really excited about this partnership. It looks like just another tool in the aviators toolbox to get flying going when keep your head in the game, whether you're not flying or before flying. So thank you for that.
I hope so. And I'd love to hear on social media. I'm managing our social media as well. So if you love it, please let us know. Shoot me an email. I think this presentation is going on YouTube, so you can look at all the contact information and everything. I thank you to Clark and Sharon, especially because you both sort of were talking to me at the same time without knowing it, I think. And so thank you for your interest. It's an honor and a pleasure to be working with both of you. And I hope we can meet up at fly-ins. And
well, you have your new aircraft, so you're coming out to Ottawa, right?
Yeah, we'll come back.
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
That's what tonight was all about, getting in your airplane and getting out there, right?
That's it, yeah. Hopefully the annual isn't too shocking when it's done.
Yeah.
Well, folks, I thank you so much for sticking it out with us. We've come to the end of the night where we got to let you go. So thank you, Jason, for that presentation. And thank you to Jim for joining us for tonight, and you'll see more of him in the next few seminars. Clark, that was fantastic. Again, we'll have to have you back for some other seminars. So we'll see you again. We know that for sure.
My pleasure. Yeah, thanks everybody. Fly safe, and I've included my contact information there in the chat. If anybody has any further questions, or if you're looking to do a flight review yourself and you're in Southern Ontario, get in touch. And I've also included James's company name and his YouTube channel there as well, so you can check him out and give him a like and then subscribe for me.
All the likes, all the subscribes, and it is not lost on us that you do choose to spend your time with us. So thank you for being here, and we'll see you at the next seminar. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Fly safe.